Hello and welcome back to Taking the Tech Exam with WM7X. In the last video, we talked about the fundamentals of radio waves, including frequency, wavelength, and the speed of light. And this time we're going to dive a little deeper, and along the way we'll learn the answers to a few more of the exam questions. But before we get started, let's get some jargon out of the way. We learned last time that we measure frequency in cycles per second, and that's absolutely true. But in the 1970s, we switched to a different name, Hertz, which is named after this guy, Heinrich Hertz. And since we always, or almost always, use millions of hertz for our radio frequency, you often see megahertz. But just remember that under the covers, megahertz means millions of cycles per second. It's still cycles per second. Okay, now that we've got that out of the way, we can get into the good stuff. We know that frequency and wavelength are two sides of the same coin, and that they always combine to give us the speed of light. That means that if you know a frequency, you can figure out the wavelength. And if we give the frequency in megahertz, then we've got millions on the top of our equation and millions on the bottom, mega. So they cancel out. And if you remember that hertz is really cycles per second, the seconds cancel out too. And in the end, it's just wavelength in meters equals 300 divided by the frequency given in megahertz. And that's actually a pretty useful thing to know. In fact, one of the exam questions is about that exact topic, and you know the answer. Wavelength in meters equals 300 divided by frequency in megahertz. And of course, we can do the same thing if we know the wavelength and want to figure out the frequency. And I'll spare you the algebra this time, but it's the same process we use for wavelength. The frequency in megahertz is just 300 divided by the wavelength. All right, last time I promised we'd talk about how the speed of light is used in antenna design. And whether we're designing a vertical antenna or a dipole or something else, we need to figure out how long to make it. And oftentimes the name of the antenna gives us our first clue. So for example, we might have a quarter wave vertical antenna or a half wave dipole antenna. And that means that the antenna we're talking about should either be a quarter of a wavelength or a half of the wavelength of the frequency that we want to use. Okay, so let's actually work through an example in the form of one of the test questions. So this one gives us the frequency we're interested in and tells us we want our antenna to be a quarter wavelength long. Okay, so we just learned how to convert frequency to wavelength. So let's start there. And we get a wavelength of about 2 meters. But we only want a quarter wavelength. That's what the question asks us. So that's about a half of a meter. A quarter of 2 is about a half. And since we're asked for inches, and we know there are about 39 inches in a meter, that gives us about 19.5 inches. So bingo. So where does the speed of light come up in all of this? Well, it's the 300 in the first step. It was 300 million meters per second. We canceled out the millions. So that 300 is really there representing the speed of light. And that helps us figure out the wavelength. Okay, in this question, it's even a little bit easier because they give us the wavelength to start with as 6 meters. They also tell us we want a half wavelength antenna, so half of 6 is 3. And since we're asked for inches and we know that there are about 39 inches in a meter, that gives us about 117 inches. And there's only one option that's even close to that, and that's our answer. All right, that's 3 more questions you can answer, and more importantly, you've got some new knowledge that you can actually use in your day-to-day activities with radio. So as always, please leave questions or comments below. And if you want more tips on how to join the hobby or upgrade your license, please just click the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We'll see you in the next video.